Hello, everyone. Today, we have Dr. Fabio Vanucci on the topic of the future of the swine diagnostician. And I'm super excited to chat with you, Fabio. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, thank you, Marcia. Thank you for having me here. It'll be fun.
So, as always, Dr. Vanucci, if you can just share with us your background, career, and how you got involved in the pig industry.
Sure. Well, how I got here, right?
Yes.
I'm from Brazil, as you know, and some of your listeners know too. And I was born actually in the metropolitan area of the São Paulo state, and I was very young to the countryside of the same state. Got my DVM there. My probably second year of the DVM, I started getting involved on the pathologist in general, and after that, starting experiencing more the contact with the swine industry and getting to swine barns, and then kind of trying to connect both area that I was passionate about. And I did my master degree in Brazil too. That was I actually got my heavily training in pathology, and then my PhD here in Minnesota when it's still infectious disease in pigs, and moved back to Brazil. And now, since 2015, I'm back here in Minnesota at the diagnostic lab. Still passionate about pigs and infectious disease in particular.
Very nice. Yeah, wow, 5 years already. It feels like it was yesterday, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Very cool. So if you can share with us, Fabio, the role of the pathologist and how that has evolved through the years, along the chain, the chains in the swine industry, and also the diagnostic capacity in the last several years.
I would think that historically, if you look at mostly the general role of the pathologist at the diagnostic process, and more specifically on the swine industry, and on the old days, they used to say that some of the lesions or the topic that the pathologists are involved on, that the lesions are used to be very sensitive in terms of detected as the change on the tissues on the old days, but they weren't that specific. In other words, based on the old school capacity for the diagnostic testing, we do have the ability to look at the lesions and see a path for a specific lesion. Let's say, oh, this looks like a bacterial infection, or this looks like a virus infection. But we don't have, at that time, we didn't have the capacity for diagnostic specific which bacteria or which viruses we are talking about. And here I'm talking about probably even before the PCR, which is a game changer, that's for sure, on the diagnostics, get into the play for the disease detection and so forth. So when the PCR came along, we now have a huge capacity of specifically detect one pathogen, and in a very sensitive way now. That used to be in the past, but it's still very specific. So you can look at some specific lesions, and you can associate the lesions with a detection by PCR, and that will be more specifically for a virus, for example. When the old days, we started with the gel-based PCR, which may not have the high sensitivity that we used to have today, but it's still very specific. So you're still able to associate the lesions and the detection of a specific pathogen. And after the PCR, now we are moving along. I would say the last 5 years or so, 4 years maybe, we're starting seeing different types of sequencing technology bringing to the table significant different capacity for detection, and not only specific detection, but a specific detection that can identify a vast range of sequencing related with a specific pathogen or not. I think we went from a sensitive histopathology assessment, from a specific PCR, and now we have a specific and sensitivity, and now we are struggling on how to interpret the whole thing.
Right.
I feel throughout the years that we always keep up with how interpreted some of the technology, and now the technology kind of jumped way over us, and we are struggling in keeping up with the machine and keeping up on how to interpret that and how to associate that with how to put that in a puzzle that helps the practitioner or the producer to pretty much optimize the health of the herd and make decisions based on the science and on the diagnostics that we are dealing with. That was a long answer.
Yeah, I love it. No, I love it. This is very cool that you mentioned that, you know, today we probably find more things that we can actually know what to do with it, right? So what would be a few examples on that arena? PCV3, for example, what's going on there?
Yeah, well, if we're talking about more this, you know, we are detecting more things that we are able to interpret it. And we can probably separate in 2 or 3 buckets of things. So thinking about sequencing technology and more specifically next generation sequencing, which basically, just very quickly background here for those that are not familiar with that, is just taking the samples or taking the virus or bacterial isolate and sequencing the whole genome of that, or sequencing everything that you have in a clinical sample. So, and what we'll do with that after you have the results, you detect a bunch of viruses. And the bucket that I was going to mention, that there is the disease investigation, where you have the clinical samples. It could be tissue, nasal swabs, or whatever it is, and you sequencing everything that is in there, technically everything that is in there, and then you come up with a bunch of viruses, PCV, PRRS, you can, and even viruses that are not related with the disease. Actually, most of the viruses are not related with the etiology of the disease that you're looking for. And most of the sequencing will be host sequencing, right? Because we are sequencing things from the pig. So the first thing, we are removing the 99% of the samples of the sequence that we got from the pig. So that will be the disease investigation bucket. You may have some lesions, but you are not quite sure what you're looking for. It might be something new, PCV3 a few years ago, or might be something that are not new, but are presenting in a different way. You may have a variant, a PRRS variant, that it's presenting a little different, perhaps with a little more CNS signs that you want to investigate. Is there a new virus there, or is just a new variant of PRRS that is presenting a different? That will be the disease investigation bucket. The other 2 buckets, it will be, you have a virus isolate, PRRS, flu, and you want to sequencing the whole genome of the virus to compare with the previous virus, or to starting building a database to have, instead of having a piece of the genome to compare it, and now going to the PRRS would be, or 5, now you have the whole virus. So you can compare with a more confidence what would be the differences between the virus that you have a couple years ago and the virus that you have right now. The third bucket, and that we are starting exploring more, which is a little bit more complex, is on the bacterial world, where you have the bacterial isolate, and you want to sequencing the whole genome of the bacterial, of that specific bacteria, to explore what type of virulence factors you are detecting on this strain that you wouldn't be detected on the strain from last year, on the strain that are behaving clinically different from that one. And when you're starting going on that direction, you're starting talking about strains that might not be causing disease, commensal strains. For example, Strep suis, which has a bunch of commensal strains that are colonizing the upper respiratory tract, but are doing pretty much nothing disease-wise. And then you have one specific strain or one specific event that you were able to detect those strains on the brain, on the heart, and pretty much all over the body. And you want to specifically explore why that specific strain are behaving different clinically. I hope that makes some sense.
Yes. No, that makes total sense. Thanks for going over that. And as you think about this topic, Fabio, what is the role of the pathologist or diagnostician for the decision-making process to optimize herd health?
Well, I see that as a one piece of the decision process. And of course, most of the decision-making process would be in the hands of either the veterinary practitioner or either the producer or either the owner of the system, as you look at it as a big picture, as an integration system, and so forth. So I understand that we were one piece of that puzzle that can be optimizing, and I think it's relying heavily on maybe a couple of things. The first one would be definitely communication among the vets or the producer and us. As communication means clarity on the problem that we are facing and clarity on the type of questions they are seeking to be answered. I think that's one of the basic steps and something that we might struggle in answer because we here are not quite sure exactly what type of question they are trying to answer. So the communication and the clarity, I think it's key for us to help. And I guess what I'm saying is we are just a piece of the puzzle that can be optimized by increasing that type of communication and exchanging information and from our side basically experiencing that we have been dealing with and how we can offer what type of tools we can offer. And here making us a little more how we can make that happen from a diagnostician perspective. The communication from our side would be more trying to clarify the strengths and the limitations of the specific tests that they are looking for. We are going to use tests Y, X, and Z, and what types of strengths or limitations we are on that direction in terms of how to interpret that data.
Right, because if you just receive a sample there without any history behind it, it's tough to figure out.
It's common, but I mean, yeah, it's like I said, communication is key. Communication is key, even from our side, even for interpretation from our side too, and understand that the basics of, as I learned for some of the mentors, if you don't know what to do with the result of a test, don't ask for it.
Right.
If you don't know how to interpret that, but
very good. Any other point there on this?
I think one of the things that we have been commonly see more, I don't know, maybe more recently, mostly I would say mostly just because of the format of the industry where you have a reduced amount of vets that are responsible for a large amount of animals. So you are those integration systems or you have responsibility of one vet practitioners that are responsible for several thousands of sows. And of course, they are not every time or every day being able to collect every single sample to submit to the lab. So they have to rely on training crews in the farm that are able to collect it properly and send the samples to the lab. Having those crews train it's key. And when I say communication, having those crew also communicating with us in terms of how to submit the samples are key. And because of that type of format that the industry are kind of taking shape on the more recent years, sometimes we feel that you have like an autopilot mode, send stuff to the lab, receive stuff to the lab, send stuff to the lab, like a vicious cycle and you may think that you are getting a big picture by looking at a spreadsheet on an Excel file with hundreds of results, but you might be missing some of the individual particular characteristics of the farm or the system because you are trying to make decisions as a whole, but the quality of the diagnostics or the samples for every single column of your spreadsheet are not there. So maybe that will be back for bad data. No data is better than bad data, right? So if you have a quality diagnostic investigation and results to make decisions out of that, even if they're not that much, you may be more confident in making decisions to a system than having thousands of them and the quality is not there. And quality is starting from submission of the samples, quality of the sample, to the single label swabs. So you send a swab that are not labeled, you don't know where it's come from, so you have that results. I mean, this is a single piece, maybe a single drop in an ocean of information that you have on a spreadsheet. But if you have thousands of drops like this, you're gonna make bad decisions out of the whole spreadsheet. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It does. Very interesting. I mean, yeah, packaging the samples correctly and all those things. Yeah, perfect. So as you look forward, what's the future of the swine diagnostician?
One of the things I particularly have experienced throughout my career so far, which hasn't been that long, it's just ability to adapt, right? So we got on this new format or starting moving target of applying or not those sequencing technology and how to make sense out of those data and how we adapt to that. And I think the ability to adapt, it's rely heavily on having a deep understanding of the technology, and the understanding means strains, bullet points of what is the strains and what are the limitations, what type of interpretation I can make out of that. And based on a new technology, it might look very interesting, new, and very attractive, but the bottom line would be how I would apply that to my reality, to my daily routine, and how I can make that translation to the vet practitioner and for the producer. How I can take that piece of the puzzle and make sense for them. I don't know if that's the future, but that's kind of I envision the moment that we are living right now, kind of, you know, the industry is living right now, or the topic that we are discussing here in terms of that we are living right now. And that was the way it is. If you think historically, when the PCR came along and different types of technologies came along, and how is that applicable or not for our reality?
Do you see any new types of diagnostics or rapid tests, anything like that right now, or that's pretty much?
If you're looking for, you're going to find that every single day, a new thing coming in. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the important things from the, you know, talking about more diagnostician, and that's our role on this whole picture. It's how does that would be applied for our reality, right? Mm-hmm. You're talking about rapid tests. Mm-hmm. And it is a concept that is out there for probably 20 years or even 15 years. And how many of those do we have that available commercially and how reliable are those to make decisions out of those, you know? I think it's an area that it's going to keep improving. And at some point we're going to get there, but I don't see, at least right now, how would that be replacing some of the traditional diagnostics investigation strategies, such as, you know, histopath and all. I don't see that right now, especially in terms of making decisions, very important decisions, for example, shipping semen all over the country based on a negative result from a rapid test. You know? Right.
Yeah, that's a big
when we're going to get there, I'm not sure, but it's something that is out there. It's something that there's always technologies coming in, and probably every week you're going to see a new one. We just have, as a diagnostician, has to be careful and see how that would be translated for the producers or the vet practitioners.
Very good. Very good. Now, you know, we couldn't end the conversation without talking a little bit about the biggest event of 2020, sad event and tough event. But I would be interested in your thoughts as a diagnostician on the whole COVID-19 aspect. Anything you'd have done different if you're in charge of the response? Or
I'm not.
I know.
It's definitely an unprecedented scenario that we are facing, and everything it has been new and changed as we go. You know, kind of adjusting as we fight. You know, from a diagnostician perspective, and mostly working with food and production animal. Well, first of all, sometimes I feel sorry for those that has to make decisions with very limited data. from a diagnostics perspective, right? So from a population level,
right?
Making decision of lockdown, opening up or not opening up, and based on diagnostic data that are maybe not there yet, how confident they are. So it's a very tough position to be in. That's the first thing.
Right.
And from our area here that work, it was interesting to see discussions that we have here in the lab every day about diagnostic tests, false positive, false negative, limited of detection of tests. They pretty much split over the lab walls to the dinner table for the general public. You are discussing that with friends that you would never imagine they would discuss the diagnostic sensitivity with a friend on the street. With a friend on the street. That's something very interesting from my perspective that I'm seeing here, and I think the general public can take the advantage of that, and it is a challenge for us in a sense that how we, and not for I'm talking about diagnosis, but pretty much from the science in general, the communication of the science to the general public, right? Mm-hmm. Your channels have some of that in terms of communicating with the producers and more on the general public, and it's a challenge, that we on the scientific community has to face, how well or how poorly we have been communicating and being clear of the data on the scientific side to the general public. It was interesting to see that, and it's a good exercise for us trying to explain what you do to a 10-year-old, things like that, how you make that sense. And that's something that and I should mention that one of the inspirations on my career and many others, Dr. Bob Morrison used to say, so you have to be able to explain what you do every day to your son, 9-year-old son. And that's a challenge. And I think if something that this COVID-19 situation has been done is exercising our brain to make that happen. And we have experiencing with some of the stuff that they're discussing a lot on that rapid test you just mentioned about. There's a lot of, if you look at the news, you're probably gonna find at least 10 rapid tests. And we have been dealing with rapid tests that may not work as we expected for years on animal industry, I would say. So for us, when we hear about that, we already have that, I would say maybe that implicit bias that, okay, we're not going to solve the problem, and there's limitations that you have to consider in applying for a huge population in a mass testing capacity. But I think we can contribute on that for the general public, clarifying those strains and limitations of those silver bullet tests, right? That is going to solve everything.
Super interesting.
I'm rambling around here because the thoughts are going.
No, I love it. Very good. I know one thing we didn't discuss a little bit about was oral fluids, right? And how that has changed the way you guys do your work too.
Oh yeah, definitely. It was we're talking about PCR as a game changer, and definitely from a population level, from a diagnostic population level, oral fluids was also a game changer for that, especially monitoring disease and monitoring freedom of disease in a herd. That has been key. It has been consolidating very well in the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years or and or more than that. And that's probably one of the things that we do every day here, and we're still doing that. And the use of that, it's just great. It's just something that we take advantage of that. And of course, after that, we also been explore other methods of population diagnostics that may or may not be applying, but definitely for now, I mean, so far oral fluid has been very much consolidated on our work here.
Very good. Do you see that in being very much used in other countries, or not that much yet?
The contact that I have the most is Central and, will be South America and North America, I would say, in addition to the US, Canada, and Mexico. And my perception is the US probably leading the use of that. I do see that in South America, and I would be more specific that I have contact in Brazil. They use that, but not as large as we use here in the US in terms of monitoring disease. And I'm sure your next question is, why is that?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't have the answer for that. It might be the configuration of the industry. It might be the capacity that we have in terms of the network of diagnostic lab here in the US. I don't think we have that anywhere in the world, state labs, the capacity to knowing what's going on and monitoring disease. That's a big part of it. As you know, there's challenge for that in South America and other countries, and this might be one of the factors that is playing there, but or maybe just delaying in picking up the usage of that as a diagnostic tool. Because I see 5 years ago compared with now, a slow increasing on that, not as large as here in the US, but it's increasing. Maybe not as fast as here, but it's increasing.
Now, one question that I'm sure you've got in conversations about, and I know I have probably started 10 years ago, is like why Brazil doesn't have PERS or Ph.D. I know. So I want to know your thoughts. I want to know what you think about that.
I worked there after before and after my Ph.D. I worked there in a diagnostic lab looking at for disease, of course. So with the training that I had here, and I would say we are pretty much based on clinical picture and lesions, right? And histopath and all that. So we don't have the monitoring of PERS in every single case that we receive in diagnostic lab in Brazil. Mm-hmm. So we do technically the PERS diagnosis or the investigation based on the clinical picture and the lesions that may be associated with that, considered as a foreign animal disease for Brazil. Mm-hmm. So based on that scenario, when I was there and with the very competent pathologists that show there, and there's a lot of competent people working on diagnostic there, we don't have the clinical picture or either the pathologists that suspecting that PERS might be there at low levels. Mm-hmm. We definitely don't have the monitoring system that we have here in the US to test every single sample.
Right.
But in terms of clinical picture and outbreak scenarios, we don't have that scenario there. So for a few years ago, we had cases or reports of PERS in South America and other countries other than Brazil. And then I do know that Brazil are having more testing and increasing the capacity of monitoring the borders with much more efficiency, with the proper diagnostics and that. But yeah, that's the experience that I have there, and that experience that we exchange with people, very competent people working in diagnostics there. So definitely it's not something that we see here, outbreaks and endemic situations, which is kind of the same for Ph.D. I mean, I started seeing more there when I was there after my Ph.D. and we, at that time, we're monitoring some of the herds for Ph.D. That was after 2013 when it hit the US. And also we didn't detect that. I mean, basically monitoring that. Again, the monitoring process there is way limited compared to the US, but it's based on the outbreak investigations.
Very interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Another aspect I like to bring up on conversations on this topic is, despite everything you said on the monitoring on others, is look, if you have PERS or Ph.D., meaning ferrin rates are gonna, abortions and preventive mortality. I mean, Brazil's ferrin rate and preventive mortality are pretty solid. So that's another, of course, more anecdotal aspect to bring to the conversation there. Very cool, my friend. Anything else on this topic before we move to the 3 questions we ask every guest every episode?
No, I think I already talked a lot.
That's what we're here for. Very good. So what is your favorite pig-related book or resource?
I don't know. That would be a different answer that you may get from other, but my favorite resources are people. Mm-hmm. network that we built in the swine industry. That's where my first to go seeking information and learning something new is. I'm very lucky to have mentors that are just wonderful, and I was able to make a good network on the industry that I can reach out people and ask questions that or seeking information that I'm interested in. I mean, that's maybe not a scientific answer, but it's pretty much what I do every week, honestly. I mean, we pretty much always learning.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's definitely a first time that someone answered that. But I remember a class from Dr. Bob Goodman back at K-State, and he taught us that, pick up the phone. That's class number 101 there on swine nutrition as well. You know, pick up the phone and call people. Very good. What's your favorite book or resource in general?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't have a favorite book, because if I said a favorite book, I will be underlining the other ones, which I don't want to do that. So you're talking about genre, right? Unrelated.
Not related to pigs.
Well, I'll pick one that I finished last year, by the end of last year. That was probably one of the top 5 or 10 books that I like to read a lot, unrelated topics. So this one that I was going to say is that they call Talking to Strangers. It's a wonderful book, and I recommend every single person, especially these times of tensions. It's a wonderful book. It's from Malcolm Gladwell. I finished probably in January this year. It's Talking to Strangers. That's my favorite one from the last 6 months.
Very nice. Yeah, he's got a bunch. I haven't read that one, but he's got The Outliers and others that are super good books. Another one
that I just finished is Range. I can't remember who's the author, but Range. It's another one. It's a good perspective for especially students and DVM students that are looking for increasing their range of learning and knowledge. That's how important is that. So
right, because today we're so specialized, but knowing some of the general aspects, right?
Basically the book, probably the subtitle of the book is How Generalist People Succeed in a Specialized World. It's very nice. It's very nice.
Very cool. Very cool. And then lastly, what do you think sets apart successful swine professionals from those who are not?
Ask questions will be the first one. Bullet points. Leave the ego outside the farm would be along with the ask question. Maybe leave the ego and then ask questions. So if you leave the ego, you're going to ask questions. Eager learning, I think it's another one. And being more specific about maybe on the diagnostician, or you can extrapolate for the clinicians, if you will, that the good clinician or good diagnostician or the best ones are not the ones that diagnose or detected rare disease at the first looking, are always the ones that don't miss the common disease at the looking. So I think that's one thing that I learned way back in the days, and things like kind of trying to carry on. So you don't need to diagnose rare stuff when you look at that, but you have to have the ability to not missing the common ones when you look at it. And it just comes with experiencing, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah, not trying to be creative on what is the conclusion, I guess. Interesting. Yeah, very nice. I love those. And thanks so much for your time, Dr. Vannucci. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no, thank you. It was fun.
Awesome.